Have you ever had that feeling that somebody was watching you? You know, in the movies, when somebody's walking down the street and they don't hear footsteps, they don't see anybody, but there's just that feeling that somebody is right there. Well, guess what? There's somebody that's talking to us. In fact, our bodies are talking to us. And our bodies are getting a signal, and that signal is coming from our food, believe it or not. And so tonight we're going to spend some time talking about what is our food telling us. We've been talking about this health. Well, what is the message that the food that we're eating is giving us? Hey, I'm Dr. Dwain Woode. If you're new to me, welcome. That's Wood with an E. The E stands for endocrinology. Here on the channel, I educate, I empower, and I encourage you to take charge of your health, your life, avoid complications, and go to the next level. And in this year, y'all, new year, new you. I'm talking to the adults with type 2 diabetes. How do we put your diabetes in remission? How do we reverse your diabetes? How do we get you off of some of those diabetes medications? That's what we're doing in this process. A year-long series, New Year, New You. Glad that you're here. If you're new to me as well, go ahead and put new in the comments because we'd love to welcome you with a hand clap and some music. Just to say hello, and if you have messages, if you have questions, if you have comments, go ahead and drop those in the comments. With your questions, though, go ahead and put a Q in front of those so that we know that that is a question that we need to get to as we get through the evening tonight. Welcome to all of you, wherever you are tuning in from. We should be streaming right now to Facebook, to TikTok, to Twitter, to LinkedIn, of course, here on YouTube and on Twitch. I do see someone out there, and let's hop over and say hello, Steve. How you doing? Glad that you are here. I see Steve over here. He's on YouTube, and I thought I saw Jennifer and Steve actually over on Instagram. Well, no, both of you are on. Okay, yeah, both of you are on YouTube. So welcome. Glad that you are here. So I think Jennifer logged in early before we even began the process, before we went live. So Jennifer, thank you for being here and hanging out with us. And Steve also, some of our community members. He says, top of the world to you, Steve. Glad that you're here. So hey, we have been talking this entire year so far about diabetes. How do we put diabetes in remission? How do we get better? And you guys know how we do it here on the show. I've got my monitor that we're going to show you here in just a minute. I've got my meter and I've got my reports. Actually, let me pull that up a little bit so you can see it a little better. And we'll see what those numbers are here in just a little bit, because while we are talking about putting a diabetes in remission, while we're talking about getting better, we want to see some results. We want to see some positive things that are going on. We want to hear your story. We want to hear where you are. And somebody said they were going to give us some good news today, so we're going to hold on to that. Don't give it to us yet. We're going to hold on to that right now. But we want to see what the numbers are. So you get to see what my numbers have been doing. My reports, my blood sugars, and we'll talk about that here in just a minute. But, you guys saw the flyer, right? So what is my food? What is my food telling me? You know, one of the big issues that we run into, and this goes back to our discussion, even as endocrinologists, we sit down and we talk, and when we are getting together at meetings, one of the questions that everybody wants to know is, why are we having the kind of issues that we're having with our diabetes? Why are we having the kind of issue we're having with metabolism? Right? And so today we're diving into a very intriguing aspect of nutrition, how each piece of food that we consume acts like a signal that orchestrates a specific response within our bodies. It's not just about the calories or the flavors. It's about understanding the deepest communication between our food and between our body, those metabolic processes, from releasing digestive enzymes to break down the food, so the secretions of hormones like insulin. Every food item we ingest, sets off a chain reaction affecting how we metabolize nutrients and how it stores energy and even how it regulates our blood sugars. So that's how important this is. And that's what we're talking. So given this complex interaction between our food and our bodies, you might wonder, how exactly do we get these different signals? How do different foods affect us? And today we're going to unpack some of that and let us know, and we begin looking at some of the common things that we need to be aware of as we're moving through this process of getting ourselves healthy. Because we've talked about so many different aspects. You know, we've talked about how do we adjust medication. We've talked about how do we include fasting in our process. How do we go about changing medications? How do we decrease it? How do we adjust it? All of those things, very important. Last week we talked about putting together a menu, and the menu becomes even more critical as we understand how those things on that menu can affect our bodies. All right? So let's process. Let's go. Let's see. So when we talk about food, right? What I want to do is I want to go through 3 different components, and these are the macronutrients that we have, and you've heard them before, right? So we've heard proteins, fat, and carbs. So let's go ahead and let's pop over and let's take a look at this process. So proteins, the function of proteins, y'all. Proteins are vital for building and repairing. That's what they do. When you eat them, the body breaks them down into amino acids. That's the digestive process. We've got these enzymes that takes a piece. When you eat a piece of meat, like yesterday. Hey, you guys want to hear something? Yeah, I'm going to tell a story. So here's the story. So I wasn't fasting, right? I wasn't fasting, but I had eaten yesterday, and my son had some functions last night, and I came home, we sat down, he and I sat down, and we ate. And my wife comes home and she says, "Hey, are we going to go out tonight to dinner?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm full." But I said, "Yes." So we go out, and I'm sitting at the table, and the lady comes over, and my wife's ordering, and I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to eat a salad because I really wasn't that hungry. I'm going to eat a salad. Maybe I'll have a piece of chicken on top of it.Maybe I'll have some salmon on top of it. And y'all, I started looking at the menu. Remember those triggers? Where's my trigger? Where's my trigger slide? Remember these guys? Right? Yeah. So anyway, so I'm sitting there and looking at the menu, and my wife orders her thing, and I'm getting ready to order a salad. And I looked and I saw those lamb chops on the thing, right? And I saw that ribeye. And my brain overrode my stomach and says, "Hey, you're at the restaurant. I mean, you guys do this once a week. You get to go out and enjoy yourself. We're listening to the guy playing on the piano. Might as well have." And so I did. I did get the salad, by the way. I got a salad, but I also got the lamb chops. So anyway, when I ate the lamb chops and I started swallowing it, the digestive enzymes in my body starts to break that down. And it chops it into amino acids. And those amino acids are what the body now uses, right, to process. It uses those to build and to repair. And the amino acids can synthesize other proteins. They synthesize enzymes. So those same enzymes that's breaking down the amino acid, when the amino acid is broken down, it can now turn around and make more enzymes. So everything from bone to liver cells to muscle cells to nerve cells, all of those things are what proteins do. And so if we don't get good proteins in, if we don't get all of those essential proteins called complete proteins, these are things that when we eat a food, if it has complete proteins, I mean, it has everything that we need. if we don't get good proteins, then we can have problems in the body. And as we talk about how foods are affecting us, the processing that we do to foods, the processing, y'all, that we do to foods affects how their signal interacts with our body. So, for example, proteins. If we denature the protein, break it down, then sometimes it makes the body, makes it difficult for the body to absorb it, or makes it difficult for our enzymes to break those proteins down. And so now it inhibits the value of that protein to our body. All right, you get that? So they're supposed to be broken down. They're supposed to come into these small things called amino acids. But if we denature them, if we put them in a form that's not usable, then the body can't use them, and that causes other issues for us. Okay, proteins. Now, I talked about meat, but the same thing happens with proteins from other sources. For example, there's a lot of protein in vegetables, y'all. People don't think you can get protein from vegetables. But if you're vegetarian, if you're vegan, a lot of your protein actually comes from beans, legumes, from vegetables. So you can get enough protein from vegetable if you're a vegetarian and so forth. But just like you can denature proteins in meat, you also can denature proteins in those vegetables. And I was talking to somebody today, and I was telling them that you can actually have a meal that's all protein. Yep, meal that's all protein. Because he was asking, how do you not eat so that your blood sugars go up? One of the options is, right, and I'm not going to tell you to do this, but if you eat meat, if you eat proteins, then you don't have spikes in your blood sugar, right? You have minimal spikes. Okay, but that's a whole nother conversation. Okay. All right. So proteins. The next thing we want to talk about is how our body handles fats. So fats. The function of a fat is very important because it is actually the body's main storage source. It's the main way of storing energy. So when we digest fat, when we eat fat, it gets emulsified. That means it gets broken up and taken into the body, and then the body takes it, makes it into fatty acids and some other things, and then it stores it in fat cells. When we have processed foods, we get these artificial trans fats that are often found in those processed foods, and they can lead to heart disease. Okay, and we're going to see something here in just a minute as we talk about carbohydrates. So fats, the main storage source, we eat them, the body emulsifies them by bile that comes out of the gallbladder, and it takes it and it stores it if it needs to, right? So that's fat. When we talk about carbohydrates, these are the big guys. This is the body's main source of ready energy. That's what all the cells use for energy. When we eat them, they're broken down into smaller pieces called glucose. That's the blood sugar we all talk about. Right. So even when you eat table sugar, which is a combination of two different types of sugars, it gets broken down into one of the components is glucose. Now, what happens to that is when we eat it, either it gets used right away for energy, or it gets stored in the liver or fat cells or muscles, as glycogen, or it gets converted into glycerol and fatty acids, and it gets shuttled away into your fat cells. So when the liver is packed, when the liver has no more space to store glycogen, to store fats, it quickly shoves it out of the liver, it gets converted into these other components, and it goes into your fat cells. Right? So those are the macronutrients. We're not going to talk right now about the micronutrients and so forth, right? Some of them will come up as we go through the discussion tonight, but we're not going to talk about those specifically. But these are the main three guys. So anytime you eat food that has these three components, there is something in it that signals to the body that the body needs to start a cascade. So you put carbohydrates in your mouth, and as soon as the carbohydrates go into your mouth, the amylase, which is an enzyme in your mouth, gets signal and it begins breaking it down. It gets broken down. Some of that sugar, some of that glucose gets absorbed and it goes into the bloodstream. And that signal from the glucose in your mouth gets sent throughout the body. One of the places it hits is the pancreas. And the pancreas says, hey, I see sugar coming. It's not here yet, but I see it coming. So I need to release some insulin. Right? You put something on your mouth and all this, the sensation of it, right? The taste of it signals to the body, hey, I need to make some acid. Right? When those proteins, when that piece of lamb chop hit my stomach, my body immediately started generating some enzymes because it's got to digest it, it's got to break it down, it's got to pull the stuff out of it so that I can begin absorbing it. So the signal for that comes from our food actually comes even before the food is fully digested in some cases. In fact, have you ever walked into a kitchen or walked into a building or walked into a location and you smelled the food and immediately your mouth started watering? Oh yeah. Right? Because that sensation, that smell that comes from that food is a signal, hey, we're getting ready to do some stuff. We're getting ready to do some damage. And so the body gets ready for that. Right? So carbohydrates. So fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. Now that we've kind of talked a little bit about the function, right? And understanding how our food can communicate. Simply by eating it, it gets broken down. The enzymes are responding to those things. What we'll start doing now is kind of going through and talking about how some processing can affect the food. Because if it's affecting the food, then our food sends a different signal and our body responds a little differently to the food that we are going to eat. Okay? All right. So let's hop over and let's take a look at a little bit more about carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are three things that we want to remember about them and the reason we're going to spend some time here on carbohydrates is because they are the thing more than anything else that's going to affect our blood sugar, right? Because we're talking about diabetes. How do we put diabetes in remission? How do we improve blood sugar? How do we lower our insulin? Remember, those are the three pillars. 1, decrease our insulin. 2, suppress our appetite. And 3, get rid of sugar. All right. So when we talk about carbs, we have simple carbs or complex carbs. Simple carbs are those carbs that are readily broken down into simple sugars. They lead to a rapid rise in our blood sugar. And when we have that rapid rise in our blood sugar, then we have insulin that comes out in response to that to try to blunt, try to decrease, to try to minimize the glucose. So if we're eating simple carbs, and we continue getting those rise in our blood sugars and then rise in the insulin, that can stress our metabolism. Now, here's an interesting thing. So if I have someone who has metabolic syndrome, pre-diabetes, diabetes, right? And I take that person and their body is making a smaller amount of insulin than they need. They're diabetic, right? That's the nature of what diabetes is. Excuse me, guys. Right? So their body's not able to keep up with blood sugar for some reason, right? There's all kind of talk about what that is and so forth. But if I can get someone and say their body is still making insulin, but it's not able to make enough. If I can get them to shift the amount of sugar or carbohydrates that's in their body lower, maybe I can get them to the point where the insulin that their body's making is just enough for the carbs they're taking in. You guys follow that? So if I can decrease the amount of carbs that are coming in the system or the sugar that's in the body, maybe the amount of insulin that you're making is just enough to treat where your blood sugars are. So that's one of the beauties of understanding the carbohydrates. So simple carbs, and then more complex carbs. These are foods that have let me say how to say it, more complex complex carbs, right? So they're not easily broken down. These are your complex wheat products. They don't have a readily broken glycogen chain, because remember, glycogen is just a series of carbs that are put together, right? So if you have more complex carbs, then it's harder for the body to break them down. And then we'll talk a little bit about fiber here in just a minute, but the fiber content may be higher. So glycemic index is a measure of the body's ability, or the food's ability, to raise your blood sugar. The faster it raises your blood sugar, the higher the glycemic index. The slower it raises your blood sugar, the lower the glycemic index. And we're always shooting for things that have lower glycemic index. Remember that? And then, of course, the fiber content. The more fiber something has in it, the lower the blood sugars are. That's why people talk about wheat versus white, because the wheat product supposedly still has a lot more fiber in it. That's why berries don't cause as big a spike in your blood sugar compared to melons, because berries have more fiber. Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit about food processing. Food processing. So when we're processing foods, the method of processing is very important. And food processing, the definition of that is anything that we do to modify foods from its original state. Right? So anything that we do to modify it from its original state. That can be as simple as freezing it, drying it, pickling it, pasteurizing it, fermenting it, preserving it. All of that is called processing. And each method can affect the food's natural structure, its shelf life, nutritional profile, and ultimately the signal that the food sends to us. Right? Because remember our premise, anytime you eat food, the food goes in, and the food within itself has a switch. It has a signal. It has a message to the body. Hey, I'm a carbohydrate. I need some amylase. Go break it down. I need some insulin to lower this blood sugar. Hey, I'm a protein. I need some enzymes to chop me up into amino acids. Or I'm a fat. I need to be emulsified, brought into the system, broken into or created into fatty acids, and shuttled away into fat cells. Right? And then when the cascade begins, and let's go back and talk a little bit about the carbohydrates for a minute. So the carbohydrate, when you eat it, the amylase breaks it down, or it gets absorbed, goes into the body, it goes off, it says to the body, hey, I need some insulin. Right? The body takes it, and then the body has to make a decision. And the decision maker is the insulin. If insulin comes out, insulin's job is to store. So anytime you see insulin, insulin's going to try to store something. That's why we say we got to minimize the amount of insulin, because anytime the insulin is high, we're putting on weight. I don't care. You're going to put on weight. Right? One of the I guess I was going to say hidden secrets, but it's not hidden, because you guys know, you're sitting out there, you're living it, right? I'm living it. I can take somebody who has a good blood sugar, sorry, not good. I can take somebody who has a high blood sugar, 200, 300, 400, A1C of 14, 10, whatever. And if I put them on insulin, their blood sugar comes down and their weight goes up. The blood sugar gets better, but the weight goes up. One of the things that I've seen in my practice, okay, and this may be a bad time to talk about it, but hey, here it is, right? When we did a lot of pediatrics, what would happen is my young ladies coming to the end of the year, what do they want to do? They want to go to the ball. They want, to the prom. They want to go to graduation. They want to fit in that dress. And you know what they did? they allowed their blood sugars to rise by not taking all the insulin they needed so they could lose weight, so they could fit into the dress. And now, so let me say that I'm picking on the young ladies, but it's not just young ladies. Everybody does it. I remember going to my doctor once, this several years ago, right? And I walked in and he said, "Hey, your blood sugars are high," and he increased my insulin. I went home, I increased the insulin, and within a week, y'all, 1 week, I had gone up 12 pounds. You know what I did? Yeah, I turned that insulin down. I was like, no, this is crazy. Now I went back and we talked, and he said, "Hey, yeah, we had a come to Jesus moment." I'm like, dude, we got to do something else, right? Because I can't keep putting on this weight. Okay, but you guys get the idea. You guys get the idea. All right, let's see, where were we? So we're talking about methods, right? So processing methods, right? So anything that we do, that processing. So anytime we're changing the structure, changing the content, changing the form of a food, the signal that it gives is different. That's why when we talked about retrogradation in our food process last week, I said if you cook food and you eat it, so carbs, pasta, rice, potatoes, right, bread, if you cook it, eat it the same day, then your blood sugars will spike up, right? Makes sense. But if you take that pasta, take that potato, take that rice, you put it in the refrigerator, leave it overnight. When it cools, the structure of the carbohydrates that are in there, it begins to crystallize. And so when you warm it up tomorrow and you eat it, you don't get as big a spike in blood sugar, because what we've done, we have changed a property within we've changed the structure within the food, and it gives us a different property. All right. So those are our methods, right? So different methods can cause different issues. So when we're talking about mechanical processing, cutting, peeling, grinding, milling, it makes foods more convenient to eat and to cook. But it can also strip away essential nutrients like fiber and grain, or like fiber in grains. Okay. So think about taking some wheat, right? In the old days, they would grind the wheat and they would make bread. And let's assume it's the same wheat. It's not the same wheat, though, by the way. They would make bread, and I don't know if you when you were younger, used to eat bread, but the bread was a lot coarser, right? So when you ate it, it was like, sometimes you're like, man, did they grind this enough, right? Because it was coarser. Well, now we have the ability to grind that joker so finely, so small and tiny. I mean, we can crush that thing. What do you think happens when you crush it that small? Your body can absorb it a lot faster, right? Because it's just little itty microscopic particles. So as soon as it touches the tongue, guess what? It's in the bloodstream. When you eat bread that's made with that, right? And the body starts breaking it down, those enzymes, they don't have a lot to do. As soon as they touch it, it's broken down and it's absorbed. And so we get that rapid spike in blood sugar. And as a result, we get the rapid rise in our insulin. Right? So chemical processing. So chemical processing is adding, preservatives, things to add flavor, to enhance it, colors, and other chemicals that help with prolonged shelf life. Which is great because we're able to, you can go to the store in winter and get whatever that usually is there in the summer, because now we've processed it and we've preserved it. But it's not so great in some cases, because there's certain things that's in the processing that sends a signal, not only the contamination of the chemical itself, but now we've changed the structure of the food. Which is why a lot of people, I won't say that here. I'll come to that in just a minute. Okay? So chemical processing. And then heat treatment. So pasteurization, sterilization, vital for safety. And I guess that's one of the points I want to make. The things that we're talking about, a lot of the things we're talking about were beneficial to us as humans, right? We pasteurized things, and so now we didn't get sick. We sterilized it, so now we took out the bacteria, right? So we've got safety. But the sterilization, the pasteurization, the heat can denature the proteins and make it difficult for our bodies to use them efficiently. Not that they can't use them, but use them efficiently. And so we can run into lots of other issues when we use all of these different techniques. Okay? So what's the nutritional impact? And this is, I guess, what we were just talking about. So one of the nutritional things, so low nutrition, loss of nutrients. So many processing techniques, they degrade the nutrients in the food, so that while we were supposed to get things like vitamin D and vitamin C, right, and zinc, which we'll talk about in a minute, then those things are destroyed because those, for instance, vitamin B and C, they're heat sensitive. So all those places where you see they take the food and they like super steam it or super boil it, or they put it on the fire, or it's in that big vat and it's like hot, right? So a lot of those things, it strips out the nutrients. Refined grains, right? Often they remove the fiber, they remove vitamins, and that's why they got to put stuff back in, because they've taken it out. And so when you eat that, the signal that the body gets, the message that the body gets, is different from the message it's supposed to get. Okay, and of course the additives, they contain things like nitrates, which have been associated with cancer. The trans fats, as we just talked about, right, hydrogenated. They hydrogenate the food, and this can lead to heart disease. Right, and then glycemic index. So we'll see here in a minute when we talk about the specific example that we're going to use, that you raise the glycemic index. So the food itself, it may not have had that higher glycemic index, but we processed it, and now the glycemic index goes up. So when we eat it, we get a big spike in blood sugar and big spike in our insulin. So health implications. We increase the risk of chronic disease. So a lot of chronic disease has been associated with processed foods. Right? So increased risk of chronic disease, obesity, heart disease. You've always hear me say here on the channel that in the past we had problems with infection. We had problems with trauma. So you got injured and you were sick and you died, or you got injured and you had morbidity, you had a broken leg or so forth. But now the things that are causing us to die and be sick are things that are related to our lifestyle, related to specifically, a lot of cases, our food. So increased chronic disease. So digestive issues, right? So the lack of the fiber. So when we take that fiber out, then the food, we start to have different issues in our GI tract. Constipation and disturbing the gut flora, which is one of the reasons a lot of people are saying that smoothies are not good, because when you take that food, whatever the fruit is or the vegetable and you grind it up, what you've just done is you've changed the structure. You've actually obliterated the fiber. People say, "Oh, there's a lot of fiber in my smoothie." Not really, right? Because you've crushed it up so finely that there's really not the fiber that you need. And then of course chemical contamination, right? So we introduce contamination. The packaging, right? You guys talk BPA and all those plastics. They leach into the food and they can cause issues, right? One of the things in my area as an endocrinologist is a lot of the foods that we eat, a lot of the contaminants that we eat, a lot of the chemicals that we use affect hormones. And hormones are very sensitive. All right, whole nother conversation. But yeah. So we're going to take a special focus and we're going to talk about wheat, right? Special focus on wheat. Well, so this provides a perfect example of how food ulceration can impact our health. So the modern wheat processing often involves removing the bran and the germ and mainly leaving the endosperm. Right? Bran's gone, germ is gone, we got the endosperm. And this results in what we call white flour. And the white flour, well, not it results in white flour that doesn't have all those other things. So we don't have the whole grain. Some of the vitamins are gone, and some of the minerals are gone. And some strains of wheat have been hybridized to increase the yield. And this is the beneficial part. Let me say that to you. So a lot of things that we've done in terms of our food is to bring benefit. So we did it, for instance, when we talk about wheat, we'll see that we've increased the gluten content. We have certain strains of wheat that are hardier. They can support more. They can grow more. They can have high yield. But if I increase the gluten in foods, then you've heard of people who have gluten intolerance or gluten sensitivity or gluten allergies. Well, what do you think happens if I increase the gluten in foods? Now, one of the arguments that has been made is that the reason that we have so many people that have intolerance, allergies, and so forth, and a lot of these allergy and immune system disorders is because we've modified the food, and the food is more allergenic. So, for example, let's say that you had a gluten predisposition, but you ate wheat from back in the day, which wasn't hybridized, it wasn't a DNA adjusted, it wasn't anything, it was just regular wheat that came out of the ground. Well, maybe you didn't have a reaction to it. But if I now take a wheat that's created that has a higher gluten and you start to eat that, that sends a signal to your body, and the body say, hey, I don't like that. This stuff that was there before, I was just barely tolerating it. But now you gave me a whole lot more of that. Okay. So anyway, some strains. All right. So how has gluten been modified? How has wheat been modified? Number one, has been hybridized. Right? It's been crossbred to develop more hardy, if you will, strains. That is strains that can support, they can live in harsher climates. So we've been able to, they say, feed the world, right? So we can make more, we can grow more. And what we do, we combine the more desirable parts of different foods. You eat it, right? So now it grows better. We've modified it genetically, right? Some wheat has been genetically modified to give specific traits. For example, gluten, and we'll talk about why we did that, or why one of the reasons why that's good, or why we did it, maybe. And then dwarf wheats. So some of the semi-dwarfs. So these wheat, they used to grow pretty high, and they've developed wheat that is shorter. And because it's shorter, when they make the bigger wheat germ on the top, it doesn't lay over, and it doesn't die, and it doesn't sag in the water. So we've developed wheat that allows us to grow bigger, a higher yield without losing the plant, which, right, was a good thing. But it has other issues. And then, of course, we have the pesticide-resistant wheat that we've created. So in order to be able to kill the grass and the weeds that were growing up around the wheat so that we can have a high yield, we had to use pesticides to kill the insects and kill the weed that's around it. Well, when we did that, the wheat also died. So what they did was they went in and they genetically engineered, crossbred, changed the DNA of the wheat to be able to tolerate the pesticides. So now we can spray and the weeds will die, the insects will die, but the wheat doesn't die. Now, sure, that's a great thing, I believe, maybe. But what does the genetic manipulation do to the signal, the message that the wheat is giving my body? And now I'm able to use the pesticides without worrying about the wheat. So now the wheat is contaminated with the pesticides. You guys get the idea? Yeah. So lots of different things that are going on there that may be beneficial on the surface. But once again, we're talking about that signal, and I want to come back to that signal. I always want us to remember what we're talking about. And I'm not intending to demonize any process, but I want us to understand that if we are going to be healthy, right? Because we live in this world, and I guess I'll make that point in a minute. We live in this world, and so there are some things that we can't change, but we have to navigate in this space. Okay? And that's a big point in all of your health issues. There are things you can't change, but you got to be able to navigate in that space. So how do you do that? And that's what we'll keep talking about. Okay. All right. So next, let's talk a little bit about some of the processing that goes on in our food. Processing. Number one, refinement. We refine grains, right? Remember, we're talking about grains. We refine grains. How do we refine grains? Well, we crush it. We take off the shell, right? The grain, as we said, we end up with the endoderm, right? We get rid of the fiber. Sometimes the vitamin gets taken out. The minerals are gone. And the glycemic index goes up. Listen to this, y'all. Yeah, herbicides. Sorry, yeah, I said herbicide. I said pesticide. But herbicides for the weeds, pesticides for the pests. Thank you, Jennifer. So listen to this. If I take wheat, it has a certain glycemic index. If I strip away all the fiber, my glycemic index goes up. So now when I process that and I put that in my body, automatically I get a big spike in my blood sugar. And what do we say we want to do? We get a big spike in our insulin. And what do we say we want to do? We want to decrease insulin. We want to minimize our appetite. And we want to get rid of sugar. So if we get this thing that has a higher glycemic index, my blood sugar spikes up quickly. When my blood sugar spikes up quickly, then my insulin has to come out or I have to take more insulin. So I get a higher insulin level in my body. Because I have higher insulin, then my appetite is stimulated because that's what insulin does. So by eating something that was processed, I negated the three pillars that we just talked about. Sugar goes up, insulin goes up, appetite goes up. And then, of course, added sugar, right? A lot of things that we do when we're processing now, we add sugar. So cereals, breakfast bars, all the things. Like, I'm trying to think, does anybody know of a breakfast that really is not sweet? I mean, unless you're eating something savory, right? You got some ham, some bacon, like those of you who eat ham, bacon, you got some sausage, you got some eggs, right? But I had a very good person to tell me today, well, you can't just eat meat. So I know sometimes, yeah, there's carbs in there, right? Because you got to have that biscuit or that toast. So that increases the calories. And then, of course, we extrude things. So this extrusion is the process of taking foods and creating it in those different forms. like the cereal flakes. And you see those, if you go on the internet, you see those machines where they kind of blow it out and it comes out like a curl, or they blow it out, comes out like a flake, or they blow it out and comes out as whatever, right? You can make those different forms, like all those cakes, right? Where it's coming out that little thing, right? And they chop it and they stuff it, right? All those are extrusion. And that has to do with heat, and the heat denatures. And of course, pulverizing. And this is what I was talking about before. We are able to pulverize food so much more finely now. Almost upon when you, like back in the day, when you took some flour and you kind of rubbed it through your finger, you could almost still feel flour in there, right? Now you take some flour and you rub it, you almost don't feel anything. It's like silky. Try that. Go to the pantry and grab some flour, unless you have wheat flour. And all these things give our body different signals. So gluten content and composition. This is what we're talking about as an example. So modern wheat has a higher gluten content. And gluten is a protein that gives dough its elasticity. And this may contribute to the prevalence, as I was talking about, of our allergic conditions. And the modern wheat, right, the varieties that we have is used in making bread, might have more gluten, about 10 to 15% more compared to the old ones, 10 to 15% more. So why y'all? Why did we do this? Or what's one of the benefits of having it? Why? Well, baking. Because remember, it gives it the elasticity. In the old days, when you make bread, the bread crumbled. But now we can take flour and we can mold it and we can shape it and we can pull it and we can stretch it into all kinds of different forms. We get better texture. Right? So there are even gluten products, right? Gluten that you make products from gluten. You can make a patty from gluten. You can make a loaf from gluten. You can make all kinds of things from gluten. You couldn't do that and have it have the same kind of texture as it does now. So that elasticity, that pullability, right? And the industrial processes, now you can form gluten into anything you want and it will retain that shape. So there's a manufacturing, there's an industrial, there is a desirability that goes with having the higher gluten content. But, as I said, the modifications cause a higher GI, it causes quicker absorption, and the modern wheat has a glycemic index of 70 to about 75, whereas the older ones have glycemic index between 50 and 60. And remember, 50 or 60 is what we talked about when we talked about finding foods with a glycemic index. That's where we want to be. But the other ones are much, much higher. Mineral bioavailability. So there are certain substances in your body, in the food, in the wheat, that will hold on to minerals that you need, like zinc and iron and magnesium and calcium. And so when you eat it, even though they may have put it back in the food, because it has these acids that bind these minerals, you don't absorb them. And so you can be actually deficient or decreased, or not necessarily deficient, but low in certain minerals and vitamins. So what do we do, y'all? What do we do? And we're going to come back to that in just a minute. Let me do a couple of shout outs, see who's out there. Let me come back up. I saw people saying hello. So Jennifer says, hey, Steve. Dimitri says hi. Hey, Dimitri, man, what's up? Let me change to this one here. Steve says hi, Dimitri. And Jennifer saying hi. Teresa saying hi, everyone. Doctor at an early event, so I am going to watch the replay. Hey, Jennifer, Teresa, thank you for coming by. Glad you were here. Jennifer says hi to Teresa. Jennifer says my hubby has been listening over my shoulder for the past few weeks. Yesterday, he increased the garden by 12 feet. There you go. Let me get it. I love it, love it, love it. And Jennifer says, yes, celiac. And then she said herbicide. Yeah, thank you. Herbicide for the weeds. Steve says, on 2/22, I learned about fasting and controlled my blood sugar. My A1C was 6 at that point. My desire was to eliminate much of my pharmaceutical products. I have eliminated all my insulin use. What? Boom, 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 boom. There you go. There you go. Steve, my man. That's what I'm talking about right there. He says my A1C is now 5.1. Look at that, y'all. New year, new you. Don't tell me it can't be done. There it is right there. Steve, thank you for sharing that. And that's why this is so exciting to me, right? Because you get to come on and you get to see that somebody's actually doing it, that it's actually working for people, that is actually doable. And if he can do it, I can do it, right? If he can do it, I can do it. Mine was 6.1. So, Steve, you just throw the gauntlet down, dude. I'm coming after you. He said, this week we eliminated Januvia for my list of drugs. I have lost 10% of my body weight. What, man? Steve, I got to keep giving you some hand claps and stuff right there. And Jennifer says, fantastic, Steve. Congratulations. Man, Steve, I'm so proud of you. Right? Folks, that's what I'm saying right there. Okay? And it is a step at a time. And I love what you said there, Steve, that you says, back in January, it was this. Now, so we've moved, right? So we're in April, and he is moving in the direction that he wants to go. And that's the process, y'all. It is a process. That's why we are new year, new you this entire year. New year, new you. Glad that. Man, look at that. Some goosebumps. Awesome. All right. So what is our plan, right? So what's the plan? What do we want to do? Because we live in this world. It is, as they say, it is the way it is. But you can make decisions. You can make changes in your life. And this is actually a great place for the thought of the day. So let's do that right now. And the thought of the day is this: I don't have to stay where I am. I can make a change. Often we see a situation, or we're in a situation, and that fight or flight response shows up. The fight or the flight or the freeze. Because we've been doing things a way for a while. We've been told things a way for a while. We've tried some other things, and we think this is just how it is. And we see what's happening in our bodies. We see what's happening in our lives. We feel it, but we're stuck. We feel like we're stuck, and we can't make a change. We don't know where to go. But I'm telling you, where you are is not where you have to stay. There are resources. There are thought processes. There are methods. There are people out there, out here, in this space, who are making changes in their lives. And you don't have to be where you are. In this case, we're talking about blood sugars. But you may be in a job that you feel stuck in. You may be in an apartment or a house or a financial situation that you feel stuck in. You may be even in a relationship that you feel stuck in. But you don't have to stay where you are. Now, when I say you don't have to stay where you are, that means you can improve your situation. The financial situation, it can be better. The relationship can be better. The health can be better. The diabetes can be better. All it takes is education, empowerment, and encouragement. And within this space, that's what we provide. Education, encouragement, and empowerment. Or education, empowerment, and encouragement. Because the information that you get has to come in so you begin thinking differently. That's what education is all about. Not that it has the answer, but it opens up your mind to the possibility that there's a different way. The empowerment comes with the tools. And if you follow the tools, if you do the challenges, if you are following along and you're implementing the things in your lives, even if you've tried it before, try it again, try something else, tweak it. Empowerment and community, because community allows you to lean on other people, to see their successes and become inspired, and see their struggles and know you're not by yourself. I can connect with them, and I can have a different space. I can have a different life from what I have right now. So you don't have the space where you find yourself. You don't have to stay there. And that's the thought for today. All right. So, y'all. So. Let's take a look here quickly at blood sugar. All right. So that's my blood sugar right now. 104. See what my Dexcom says. It was 117. And as you guys know, my whenever I'm talking here, my report always times out because it has a certain time, and I talk and it goes out. So I got to log back in here really quickly. So give me just a second to do that, and we're going to look along and see what's been going on blood sugar wise. But if you have questions, go ahead and drop those in the chat. This is your time. This is your space when you can do that. And remember what our challenge for this month has been. The challenge for this month has been for you to create a recipe that follows these parameters. Whole foods, right? So we're minimizing the processing that we're doing, and that goes right along with what we're talking about here tonight. Number 2, no added sugar. Once again, right along with what we're talking about here tonight. Right? We want to have some starchy vegetables, some non-starchy vegetables, right? That helps us to minimize the sugar. We want to have healthy fats, lean protein. We want it to be tasty, y'all, because if it's not tasty, guess what? I'm not eating it. And we want it to be appropriate portion size, because we eat too much with respect to portions, right? So we want to make sure that you're doing that. And that's our challenge for this month, right? We got one more week for what we're going to be seeing. All right. So let's hop over. So this is, let's take a look here. So, okay, here we are. So blood sugars, right? So this is my report, and this is my report for the last 14 days. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change it to 90 days so you can see what that has been. Right, so the last 90 days, my average blood sugar is 114, as you see there on the screen. And let me get my, let's see, let's do this one. We can see a big one. Okay. All right, so 114 is my average. I'm in range 96% of the time, and the time in range that's 70 to 180. You see that down there at the bottom. 70 to 180. And this thing says that if I continue this, then my A1C is going to be 6.0, right? So now that Steve's throwing down the gauntlet, okay, everybody, that's what we're going to be doing, right? We're heading for Steve. Steve, we're coming after you, man. Okay. And then let's take a look at our daily graph so you can see what's been going on, because there are a couple of things here I want to show you. So as you remember, I ended my fast right here at 6 o'clock on Friday and started eating. And by midnight, we were at 106. Coming into the next morning, we were 107, 107, 107. And so I brushed my teeth. And then we had, actually, I was on the media team. And so that's probably a little stress right there. And we came back down, and then I had had lunch with the family right around here. And so blood sugar started to go up, went up to about 155, came back down into the 120s by midnight. Sunday morning, right? So we're still up at 130s, 130s, 150s, 160s right there. And then back down, and then right around here is where I ate. And notice that, right, lamb chops and salad. Look at that. 130s, 140s, 150s, right? And then, of course, today, 130s down into 190s right there. And then I had to change my sensor because it expired. And so we've been kind of riding in the 130s, 140s. Right. And so if you guys remember what I said to you is no insulin and actually no Manjaro, because Manjaro is out. If you're on Manjaro right there right now, you know that you haven't been able to get it for at least 4 or 5 weeks. So I think my last Manjaro shot was about 5 weeks ago. Right. So we're heading there. And so as we are talking about blood sugars and as we're talking about putting diabetes in remission, and I say this to all of you, if you are taking a GLP, the question that I have to ask you and the question I want you to answer is, what are you learning in the process of being on it so that if it goes away, the insurance doesn't pay for it, you can't tolerate it anymore, you can't afford it anymore, what are you learning that is going to help you maintain where you are? Right? Because remember, that's our goal. Our goal is not to just do this for 5 minutes and then go back. Our goal is to develop a lifestyle that we can do for the rest of our lives. Okay? And so let's hop back over and let's talk about what do we do in terms of processing food, right? So number one, you want to choose whole foods. That's why that challenge was there, right? Was to begin getting you to think about the process. Whole foods, things that are as close as possible to their original form. Even though some of it is modified, right? We want to continue as close as possible to its original form. Number two, right? You want to read labels carefully. Read labels carefully. Because there are things that they'll tell you. For example, if you read a label and the first thing that you read is sugar, guess what? That's probably not one that you want to include in your cart or in your diet, right? So read those carefully. We'll come back and we'll have a show at some point where we talk about going through labels, right? Cook at home as much as possible, right? So there are times when you're going to go out. And when you go out, you've got to be able to choose the things that are healthy for you, right? Like last night, the lady came back after we finished. You know, we ate up the lamb chops, we had the salad, and we sitting there, my wife and I talking. She come back and said, "Did you guys save space for dessert?" And I almost beat her away from the table. Say, "Yes, I did, but no, go away because I can't have any dessert," right? But cook at home. Shop local produce, right? Find places, like we have farms around here. Find places where you can go and find out from them, hey, how do you process your stuff? What do you do? And begin buying from them. Encourage them. Because if not, guess what's going to happen? Right? If the other people are using the pesticides and the herbicides and they are getting higher crops and they're getting more money, the farmer, the little guy who is trying to be organic is going to stop because he can't afford it because nobody's coming to buy. So patronize your farmers. Minimize sugar and salt intake. Minimize sugar and salt intake. Most of us drink all of our calories. So all those sodas and juices and all those things, right? So let me hop back over to Whole Foods. Now, I'm not going to knock smoothies, but eat an apple instead of juicing it. All right? Educate yourself, y'all, on food techniques. Food techniques. Last week we talked about preparing a meal, grilling, right? So grilling and baking and sautéing and all those things, so that you can begin developing and utilizing different flavors of foods, so it's not as monotonous. Support regulations and transparency, right? Get out there and in your local area, find out what's going on. There are initiatives that are coming through. You can vote. You can be a part of the process, right? Support your folks. Support your legislation that is in keeping with what we are dealing with and what we want to do. Use healthier cooking methods, right? If you drop it in batter and put it in the fryer, right, you're going to have one thing compared to if you bake it, right? Now, somebody's going to say to me, well, some things just don't taste well if you don't drop it in the fryer. Well, that's probably true. But we're working on improving our taste. And then you all eat a balanced diet, because if you are well-rounded, you're getting all the nutrients and all the vitamins and all the minerals and the right amount of protein, and you're getting complete proteins, and you're getting all the fat that you need, good fat. All those things are there. And I want to give a special shout out and a special thought to my vegetarians and my people who are vegan, right? Don't let anyone convince you or tell you that you're doing something wrong. You can be just as healthy on a vegan diet. You can get all the protein, a vegan or vegetarian diet, you get all the protein you need. There's nothing wrong with it. Okay? All right. So y'all, let's talk, right? So how do we do it? Right? Part of our thought of the day dealt with our Triple E formula for success. Educate, we empower, we encourage. You guys heard that, right? Providing the shows, providing the website, providing the podcast, providing the blogs. All of those things are the education. We got to change our thought process, change our minds. The tools that we're learning, all those things, right? The heat model, which we'll come to in just a minute. The emotional intelligence, just being able to be aware of where you are. And the things that are driving you to eat a certain way or to be a certain way. Adjusting your medication, just like Dimitri said that he did. Not Dimitri, but Steve, sorry. Right? Steve said he did. Right? Learning that process. How do you do that? Talk with your doctor. If you're one of my patients, you know that I talk about that. I say, hey, this is what we want to do. I teach you how to do that. But talk with your doctor and say, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to improve my health. I want to begin working on decreasing the medication. Now, that means you got to be doing your part, right? Because your doctor is not just going to tell you to stop medication. You got to show that you're getting benefit. And remember the things we're doing. We are decreasing insulin, suppressing our appetite, and decreasing sugar. The tools, that's the empowerment. And of course, the encouragement comes here on the show, in the community. When we have our meetups, come on out, ask questions, be a part of that. We had a great meeting last week at our second meetup. Right? Keep an eye out for the one that's coming up in May. Right? It's going to be there. The heat model, one of the things that I'm pushing, and the reason I'm pushing this, guys, is this is the thing. These are the things that are going to derail us. The habits. Went out last night with my wife, sitting at the table. Wasn't hungry, but because we're at the table, that's what we do. We eat. So I got the lamb chops. They were good, by the way. Emotions. Angry, lonely, tired, bored, frustrated. When we do that, we eat. People say to me all the time, I'm an emotional eater. Let's figure out how to let's figure out how to fix that. How do we deal with emotions in a different way? Access There are things I can't buy. I've agreed, Jennifer, Teresa, if you guys are out there, remember we had our last meetup. I said I wasn't going to buy those almonds. I bought them. Jennifer, I bought them, Teresa, and they are gone. And some of those blood sugars that you saw were like in the 130s, 140s over the last several days. Those are almonds and cashews. But they were there. I bought them. I brought them in the house. And I said to myself, here's the trick, y'all. We'll say to ourselves, you know what? This is not as bad as the candy I used to eat. Right? But guess what? Right? For some of us, there are some things that we eat that will spike our blood sugars up just as much as candy. So you got to be careful. Right? You got to be careful with them. And then taste. The perfect combination of sugar, salt, and fat. That's what the manufacturers do. The bliss point to get you to say, I can't just have one. I'm going to have 2 of those donuts. I'm going to have 5 of those candies. I'm going to have 2 of those candy bars. I'm going to drink 2 of those bottles of soda. And then the tricky thing there, the insidious thing there, is that the taste reminds us of some of the emotions. Right? So it kind of feeds back on itself. And then y'all, our call to action. Number 1, come on, join the challenges. Don't just let the shows be things that you listen to that you put on the shelf. Engage with them. The challenges that we have, the things that we're doing on a monthly basis, get in there and do them. Like I said, the challenge for this month is to create a meal that falls into these parameters. Whole foods. Minimize processing. No sugar. Starchy and non-starchy vegetables that are in there. Right? Healthy fats, lean protein, tasty and appropriate portion size. Be a part of the group. When you come share your story, like Steve did, to let us know we can do it. And when you have challenges, come on. Don't keep those to yourself either. Let us know, because we know we're not by ourselves and we can encourage you. You can encourage us. It's a process. The show, the program, the community is as strong as you are. When you come here, you make the community strong. That's why I love being here, because you guys are part of my accountability. Right? When I pull up these reports, I can't have blood sugars going crazy. Or I can, right? But I am encouraged to not do that. You don't think I wanted that dessert that the lady asked me about last night? I sure did. But I said if I ate that dessert, there's gonna be like 300. And Steve's gonna say, Dr. Wood, what'd you do? Jennifer's gonna send me a text. I said, what happened over there? And then y'all invite somebody else. Don't keep it to yourself, right? There are so many people that can benefit. So many people that are out there that are struggling. They're frustrated. They're tired. They don't know what to do. They're lost. And you can say to them, hey, there's this place that I go. There's this stuff I listen to. There's this things I've been doing. Come, let's watch it together. Form a group party. Form a chat within your house. Get some of your family members together, your church people. Say, hey, let's go watch this. Let's do it. And if you're out there right now, and let me do this so I can talk to you directly. If you're out there right now and you just found this, and you say, oh my God, they're 3, 4, 5 months in. Or even if you found this next year, you're like, oh my God, they're way behind me. I'm lost. No, start where you are. Start watching the shows and start implementing the things that you're hearing. Because they're timeless principles. But let somebody know what's going on. Send them the link. As my pastor says, be a digital disciple. You know, even if you're on the Android anointing, go ahead and do that. Copy the link a couple of times, send it out. Share it with somebody. Send them an email. Right? If you go to the YouTube channel, you'll be there, and if you hit share, it'll come up and it'll bring up all of your social media things that you can share it to Facebook and TikTok and Twitter and all those different things. Yeah, but other than that, just copy the link. Send it out to somebody. Let them know that they can come and they can watch. Okay? But as always, y'all, as always, I can't tell you how proud I am of all of you that are out there, all of you that are on this journey, all of you that have been fasting, all of you that have been trying to work on your emotional intelligence, talking about the whys, trying different cooking methods, right? Trying to create the recipe, because you don't have to do that. But you've made a decision that this year is not going to be like last year. Come next year, you're going to be better. And for that, I'm so, so, so excited. I see Diane. Diane says, I'm so glad I found you on this. Diane, glad that you are here. Thanks for coming through and being with us. Y'all, this is Dr. Dwain Woode. As always, excited to be in this space and excited to be talking with you. That's Wood with an E. The E stands for endocrinology. Here on the channel, I educate, I empower, and I encourage you to take charge of your health and your life, avoid complications, and go to the next level and create the life you've always wanted. And in this year, y'all, new year, new you. Good night. We'll see you on one of our check-ins as we begin our fasting in a couple of days. Bye-bye.